agriculture has a marketing problem. And I think there are different ways, different channels, different vehicles to better tell the story of agriculture.
One, two, three.
Coming up on The Modern Acre, we're talking to Scott Nelson, founder of Make Hay, a B2B marketing technology platform that enables brands to produce authentic and trusted ag-related marketing content at scale.
The Modern Acre podcast explores the latest in business, investing, technology, and sustainability in agriculture, and we're your hosts, Tyler and Tim Nuss. If you'd like to dig deeper with The Modern Acre, check out our membership community, The Modern Acre Co-op. The Modern Acre podcast is presented by American Ag Credit. American Ag Credit is a proud member of the Farm Credit System, which was created more than 100 years ago with the sole purpose of serving the financial needs of farmers and ranchers. From small farms to the largest agribusiness enterprises, American Ag Credit understands agriculture and how to structure customized financial solutions. Just like many of the guests we have on the pod, American Ag Credit recognizes that the evolution of agriculture is inevitable and exciting. Their goal is to be at the forefront of this evolution, partnering with producers to grow their future in ways they haven't imagined yet. To learn more about American Ag Credit and to receive exclusive access to reports from Terrain, a research and insight service of American Ag Credit, visit agloan.com/terrain or check the link in our show notes. All right, Tim, super excited for this episode. We're talking about farmers being social media influencers. Tim, this has been just an interesting journey for us. When we started this podcast, it was really focused on business in agriculture across farming, ag tech, agribusiness. And we know we've gotten more involved in the family business and have explored what does it look like to have kind of the farm have more of a social presence. We've gone kind of through this ebbs and flows of it, right? Like we started an Instagram a few years back, trying to kind of build a brand for Nuss Farms, and have over the past year or so left that pretty stagnant. Hadn't really been consistent with that, focusing on the podcast more. It's this really interesting question of specifically for farmers who aren't necessarily engaging directly. Their customers aren't consumers, right? They're often going B2B, going to a processor, going to a broker, et cetera. So it's just been this really interesting thing. I've been pushing you recently, Tim, of farming content. I feel like would do great on TikTok, make some videos around how peppers are planted or peppers are harvested. This was a really interesting conversation with Scott because it's like top of mind for us, right? Of like, should we be doing this? Should we be spending time and energy? I think you should be a farmer influencer, but you only have so many hours in the day, and you want to be strategic about it, right?
Yeah, the subject matter is just so interesting because, like you were saying, we've tried to create an Instagram. Like, what does that really do for us as a farm that can't sell direct to consumers? So I think it's really interesting what Scott's building to kind of actually make a platform to really connect these dots where we grow crazy amount of produce on the farm every year, but very little of that messaging actually makes it to the consumer. So I think being able to package ag content in a different way is a huge opportunity. Scott's background is awesome, like coming from Panera Bread that he gets into of just their food sourcing, and they were one of the first OG companies to really talk about transparency in food supply chains. And Scott was early to kind of their social content around that.
If you guys are excited about marketing, digital marketing, social media influencers, ag tech, all mixed into one, this is the interview for you. Let's jump in with what's top of mind for Scott.
Top of mind for me right now is heads down, building out a software, building out a tech platform that will hopefully add tremendous value to the ag sector. So top of mind for me is making as many mistakes as I can right now so I build the right thing. So again, we're a small team. We just launched about 2 or 3 months, even though we've been on the scene for about 7 or 8 months. So right now, I am just up all night making sure that we create a piece of software that farmers, the ag industry at large, will use.
Yeah, super exciting times when you're early on in a company journey. Building something from scratch is always a lot of work. You bringing an idea to market, raising capital, all the stuff that goes along with building a company. And we've been in touch for a couple months. Super excited what you guys are building and want to dig into that. But before we jump in, Scott, maybe let's give a little background on yourself and what led you into the space.
Yes. So 20 plus years of content creation, 20 plus years of marketing strategy, innovation roles at some amazing iconic brands like Nike Inc., Converse, Rakuten, Panera, and then also some really small, innovative startups, some that scaled and did very well, some that did not scale and failed. So all sorts of kind of different perspective on the role of marketing, the role of content, and how it can help build a business, a brand, etc. So all of that, to answer your question, Tim, kind of have come to fruition in this new company that we've called that we've launched called Make. It has been a collection of all of that learning that I've learned throughout those different companies. But then, really, about 7 years ago, when I actually got into food and ag, and I joined Panera Bread. And Panera Bread, at the time, I never saw myself working for a restaurant company, to be quite honest. But I fell in love with not only the food, but with their positioning and how they spoke to their consumer. And Panera was founded on the belief that our founder at the time, Ron Shake, he did not want to serve our customers any sort of food that he would not put into his kids' own stomachs, right? So he really was one of the pioneers around this idea around 100% clean food, food transparency at scale in the food service industry. So I fell in love with this idea around food as it should be, clean food. I spent my days and nights at Panera for years and years telling the stories of where your food came from, the ingredients that you're putting in your body, the people behind those ingredients, all of that. So I learned, early on this idea of food transparency throughout the supply chain.
Super cool. I'm excited to get into Make Hay. I want to stick around at Panera for a minute. I mean, when we talk about marketing and branding, like a lot has changed, right? Over the past, since you started at Panera, like the rise of social and paid social. Like what were kind of the biggest changes from kind of in your marketing role? What were the big switches that you flipped over that time?
Yeah, so I was brought in. So I'd come off a stint at Rakuten and working for a mobile messaging app called Viber, about 1 billion users, similar to WhatsApp, all the WeChat, what have you. And we were based out of Tel Aviv. And I don't know if you've ever worked with a Tel Aviv startup, but some amazing minds, amazing engineers, amazing product developers. You learn like how to build a really interesting and engaging and sticky piece of technology when working with some of those folks over in Tel Aviv. So I was coming in with fresh eyes. I came in, and I tell people this, and they think I'm actually not being sincere or truthful, but I am. When you work for a mobile messaging app, you're pretty much on your phone working the entire time. I pulled out my laptop maybe once a week, but like you got to know your product, you got to know your customer, and if they're all on this messaging app, that's where you live and breathe every day. So people like to say, oh, mobile mindset, I'm digital mindset, but like you don't actually really understand what it means to be mobile mindset and digital mindset until you actually work on your mobile phone day in and day out for a couple of years. So I was bringing that sort of mentality to an organization at Panera where TV ads and radio ads and billboards were 80% of their marketing spend. And guess what? It worked. It worked. The franchisees loved it, right? They were used to those things. But I kind of came in and said, we can still do those things and we can do them probably better. But then let's also do these things over here and let's really dial up digital. Let's dial up, strategic partnerships, media partnerships. Let's dial up, different ways to interact with our consumer in cafe, in store. So I brought just kind of like a new muscle to an organization that wanted it and needed it. And to the credit of Panera and everyone that worked there, they took it and they wanted to do things differently and reach a different audience while still not alienating the core. Like that's another thing that you learn when you go to a brand like that. You cannot alienate that core because they had the largest loyalty program in the business, dwarfed Starbucks at the time. So like, you just can't screw it up. Go do your thing and try to like build and do interesting things to kind of build the brand in different mannerisms in different ways. But don't alienate the core, Scott. If you alienate the core, we got problems. So, we got nominated for Emmy Awards with some of the work that we did. Who would ever thought Panera Bread would be, in Los Angeles up for an Emmy Award around, some really interesting things they did with Facebook Watch and Huffington Post. Like, who knew? Right. So, long-winded answer, Tyler, but we just needed to kind of think differently when it came to the traditional kind of formulaic food service, formula, if you will.
That's awesome. Well, let's jump in here. Scott, tell us about Make Hay, kind of the idea behind it and where you're at in the process.
Yeah, okay. So again, remember that food transparency thing that's been in my head, since 2017 at scale. Again, we were one of the first to really do it. Now, you look around you, you look at the data. Consumers want to know more about what they're putting in their body. They want to know more about where their food is coming from. That is facts. So therefore, it is table stakes. And so you have all these companies in the food space and beyond that are trying to figure out ways to tell these stories and be more transparent with their consumers. So that was one of the headwinds. That was one of the things that not headwinds, I should have tailwinds, that I knew that this idea of transparency at large wasn't going away. And in fact, it was growing and growing and growing. I was brought into this innovation fellowship at Purdue University. I knew Purdue from my days growing up in Minnesota. I knew it to be like an engineering school with okay Big Ten sports. But I come to find out that, it's the number 3 food and ag program in the US, number 5 in the world. So like they got cred when it comes to food and ag. So they started this thing called Dial Ventures where they bring in different folks from different backgrounds, specifically with the digital background, food and ag. And they want you to look at the agribusiness at large and figure out where there are pain points, friction points that need a digital solution. So it's about a 7-month process. They put you out in the fields, so you're getting out there with all the farmers. In my specific fellowship, we were in the Midwest, primarily Minnesota, Iowa, Indiana, and you're meeting all sorts of growers and producers of all kinds. But then you're also meeting with, executives from General Mills, Cargill, Ecolab, Hormel, CHS, Land O'Lakes, all of that. So you surround yourself with a really good kind of overview of all things throughout the supply chain in order to kind of, figure out what business you should build and what business could scale. So what I kept hearing is, and we heard from a lot of the farmers, all of the farmers, Scott, I have a great story to tell. I wish I could tell it. I don't know how to. I don't have the resources. I don't have the time. But like what happens on my land is fascinating, and I wish more people knew about it. I wish I could tell my story, Scott. And I thought it was cute at first, but then like I kept hearing it more and more and more and more. And as a marketer, when I start seeing these types of things and hearing these types of things, I start to think, and I start to think, okay, this is a thing. There is something here. There is something here that needs to be done, and it's not currently being done. Yes, people are telling their stories in ag. I'm not the one coming in hot saying nobody's telling stories of agriculture. They are. I would just want to, put something on a little bit more on that. Like, okay, are you telling those stories? Are they getting to the right people? Are they getting outside of the bubble that you're telling them to? So how not only can we make it better to tell the stories for these folks, but how can we get it out to more people? Look at better distribution and all of that. So I kept hearing that, Tyler and Tim, and I thought it was fascinating. So I was like, all right, I want to build on that. I want to build on that. And then I kind of geeked out and went into the data part of my mind. And I looked at, social media, and I look at like, hashtag farm talk and all these different hashtags around like farming, ag, sourcing, all of that. And I knew enough to be dangerous coming from Panera because we were best in class in social media. We killed it. And whenever we did things around sourcing and where the ingredients came from, we would get huge engagement. So I knew there was something there. I didn't know to the extent of like, hardcore agriculture, farming, et cetera. And the data told me as much, 16 billion views in the last few years on TikTok alone around things like hashtag farm talk, 250 million views a month across Instagram, Facebook. So I'm like, oh, okay. There's a lot going on here. And so I started to say, okay, if you create the right, agricultural based content, put it in the right digital space, you could get a lot of eyeballs engagement on this stuff. And then I start thinking, all right, okay, how do you monetize this? So then I go to like some of the farming influencers out there, if you will, or those content creators that are currently on these different channels. And I look at a lot of their content. It's great. A lot of it has lots of engagement, lots of following. I didn't see a lot of brand deals per se. I didn't see a lot of these folks monetizing their content. And I, soon learned why. It's like, I'm a farmer first, but, I want to tell my story, but like, I don't have time to like reach out to the Chipotle influencer marketing manager or the Whole Foods, social media man. Like, it take time. It's tough. I'm not doing that. I'm a farmer first. So, I saw not only with the current folks that are creating content, there's a better way to help them monetize and connect them with some of these partners that would be interested in their stories. So you take all of that stuff combined, Tim and Tyler, this food transparency at large that's been in my head, the data and analytics around it, the farmers and growers raising their hands saying, I have a story to tell. But then I kind of wrap it back into my world in my last 20 plus years around content creation. And again, as I told you, I've spent lots and lots of money on marketing. I've spent lots and lots of money around content creation, telling you where your food came from and all that. And I've wasted lots and lots of money. A lot of my friends that are CMOs, they would sit here and tell you that there is a lot of waste in a lot of these marketing departments at a lot of these large companies that I always just thought, there's got to be a better way to like create this type of content. Or instead of doing that, like, let's try that. Or instead of like paying this influence over here that already has tons of brand deals, like maybe we should try something a little bit more organic and authentic. So there was a lot of waste going on right now. And again, I'm guilty of it myself. So I wanted to figure out a better piece of technology that could kind of help in that realm. So again, now you take all those things. So better marketing efficiencies, food transparency, farmers have a story they want to tell. And oh, by the way, there's a lot of people craving for that content in the digital space. And voila, McKay was born.
Love these story. I love hearing these stories about how these ideas come together and kind of the building blocks of it of, here's the opportunity. What are the challenges? What are the pain points? What can I uniquely kind of fit in and solve here? Scott, before this call, Tim was, prepping me on the conversation and telling me about McKay because he's had some conversations with you. And I was like, yeah, this makes a ton. This is a UGC play. Mm-hmm. And Tim's like, what's UGC? And so I think a lot of people don't know what UGC is and kind of how that fits in versus like an influencer doing their own thing, proactively reaching out to brands, trying to get brand deals. Can you maybe walk us through level set for people that don't know what is UGC and how does that fit in?
Yeah, I'll take it back to the beginning because I fortunately have been doing this for about 20 years, long before they were even called UGC or content creators or influencers. We were just partnering with, this was during the sneaker days at Nike and Converse, when we were just partnering with cool kids in the basement that like to play drums, right? And wore Chuck Taylors. Like, those were the cool kids. They didn't have Facebook followings, but those were the people in the neighborhoods that everyone turned to when they wanted advice on something, right? And so I've been doing this a while, and I've paid celebrities lots and lots of money. I've written huge checks. I then was kind of anti that, and I got into like, oh, let's drop down a tier. And this is when like influencers really did come out. And so, folks with 500,000 to 1 million, you're still paying them, but it's a little bit more authentic. But then they started to become really big, and brands were flocking to them. And, every day there was another post for another brand. So then it's like, how authentic is this crowd? So then I dropped down to like the world of like what we call micro influencers. And those were folks, with lesser followers, but huge engagement, right? And then, the micro influencers blew up, and then it was like nano influencers. So like literally people with like under 10,000, but again, huge engagement, right? And so I flocked towards them. And, then I was like, gosh, now I got to pay them. Maybe kind of like, I really have to pay this person. And so, I've seen the gamut. I've always come back to the everyday, everyone can become an influencer as long as they know how to use their camera phone. I truly believe that. And if you love something, if you love a brand or a product and you want to speak about it and you want to create really good content around it, you can become an influencer. So, there's this whole world of influencers continues to change. And a lot of these folks, they used to make a lot of money, but now it's just so saturated that a lot of these folks, they thought this was going to be their big career, and it's just not going to be their career. But I appreciate what they're doing, and a lot of them have become very savvy in it, and they've really learned the business, and brands have learned to really engage and how not to engage. And so, I think it's been a really interesting ride over the 20 plus years. I do think we've lost a lot of authenticity. We do. I mean, We were talking about some like, I don't know, some beauty brand in New York City the other day, and my son, the 12-year-old, was overhearing it, and there was this talk about, because there's influencers was posting about it, and my 12-year-old son goes, "So what does that mean, Dad? Like, she posts about it, and then she just gets to use the facility for free in return?" And I'm like, "Yeah, actually, that's actually how it works." He's like, So it's like, how authentic is that? So, like, do you really love it? But anyhow, authenticity is now come around, and it's like, most consumers are really smart with what is being sponsored, what's not, all of that, and how authentic. Like, do you really love that thing? So, long story, UGC, farmer generated content. UGC is and started as just like, okay, folks are going to create their own content, put it out there around, let's just say, a specific brand, right? And then that brand's going to use it. They're going to use it for their channels or whatever marketing needs they have. UGC, and it's gone through a lot of different iterations. The only thing with UGC that I think is kind of interesting is it can be the Wild West. And what I mean by that is, like, is there a specific brief tied to exactly what they're trying to say? Like, are you navigating and directing that as much as you'd like to? Is there a specific, like, narrative that's trying to be told? I don't know. So I do like to think of there's a lot of variables when it comes to certain types of UGC. But then on the other side of the spectrum, as I just illustrated, is the influencer model and the paid content and all that. It's becoming very scripted, where you're losing that authenticity. So for me, it was like, well, what's that middle piece? How do we do this where the farmer, the everyday farmer, the everyday producer, the everyday agricultural type is actually becoming this content creator, but we're not giving them too much of a script where then it doesn't become authentic to their story and what they want to be telling. Because the second we tell a farmer to, hey, we want you to say this or do that, it's done. We're done. That's not authentic. But at the same time, we all both know that you got to give them something. You got to give them something. Otherwise, they're not going to really know what to do, some of them, or some of them want direction, right? And so that's where our software comes in mind. And we built out a really amazing briefing system through AI that basically really kind of scripts exactly what we're trying to show and what that type of content needs to be. I sent Tim a video that we put together, and it shows, like, okay, show us how you grow peppers, right? And it's very simple in construct and very direct in terms of what we want. Or show us the most important part of harvesting, or show us this, show us that. So the technology that we're building is hoping to empower and enable this authentic form of, farmer generated content, if you will.
It's such an interesting space. Ty is always on me of, like, you need to start a TikTok for the farm. We have an Instagram account that we haven't maintained for the past couple of years. Do we do LinkedIn Shorts? It's kind of overwhelming. Like, there's a lot of content we could be capturing, but it's really time consuming for me to actually, like, be able to edit that, post that when I'm at the farm, where I can get a lot of videos out. And so this model makes a lot of sense to be able just to capture the raw video and then have a service like yours be able to get that to the right places.
How do we make digital storytelling a part of the daily farm operation? It should be. It really should be. And it could only take you 5 minutes. If you're on autopilot on the John Deere, give me some footage. I don't even need you to be talking to the camera. Just show me some sunset picture of the John Deere going through the land. I would buy that. So again, how do we make this important part that many have not thought of just part of the daily operation? Again, could be 5 minutes.
Walk us through the just monetization here. So you're working with brands, you're basically providing them a one-stop shop for farmer generated content, like you mentioned. Are you, when they're paying for that content, are you just taking maybe a percentage of that and then another percentage is going to the farmer? Is that how it works?
Exactly. So it's a monthly subscription fee, SaaS-based platform, right? Where insert brand X pays X amount of dollars on a monthly basis to get X amount of pieces of content from a farm, facilitated through X amount of briefs that they put into our software. And then obviously a portion of that goes to the farmers, because again, that's, why we started this thing. How do we get additional, income streams into the farmer's pocket without them having to leave the farm, actually? So providing that secondary income stream to the farmer. So that's the model. What I will say it is not for everyone right now. It is not. I wanted to start, having done numerous startups in the past. I've seen some that have started very niche, but quickly pivoted, like out of nowhere, and they went too broad and they failed. And so I'm okay with being very niche right now, specifically when you have an industry that kind of needs it and kind of needs something like this. So we are starting very focused in what we're doing, with obviously plenty of opportunities to scale into other industries and categories. But Tyler, hopefully I answered your question around our business model.
Scott, want to zoom out a little bit and just talk about kind of content marketing within ag, like any companies that you're following that are doing a really good job. I think it was really interesting to see John Deere with their push a couple months back with their chief tractor officer role, where they're really trying to promote that side of the business. Like who's doing things good in content marketing ag and who's struggling?
So this is my hot take. I'm gonna skip to my hot take. And I don't know if it's too much of a hot take, but what I see, again, fresh eyes to some degree, agricultural has a marketing problem. And I think there are different ways, different channels, different vehicles to better tell the story of agriculture. And, when you look at where we are right now and how there's a lot of folks that are leaving the farm and not staying on the farm, and that younger generation of farmers we have to keep, inspired. I'm hoping, Make Hay and other platforms that might come on the scene can kind of uplift ag industry at large, and keep folks really interested. So, I do see there being a marketing problem, at large in the industry. I think, to answer your question, Tim, who are some of the folks that are doing it well? Let's use John Deere. Beck's hybrid seeds in Indiana, they're really good. They're really good at what they do. They do a lot of like grassroots. They do some traditional stuff. Like, I wouldn't say less digital. They're excellent at. Not that they're bad, but like, you're driving around Indiana and you're just seeing like signage from Beck's everywhere. So they have a really good job of like getting their brand out there on a more grassroots like type level, if you will. But John Deere, I love John Deere. I love the brand. I've been rocking that hat for a while. I thought the chief tractor officer was brilliant when I first saw it. I've been there. I've done marketing stunts that are meant to get tons of headlines. And guess what? Job well done. They got tons of headlines. They incorporated Brock Purdy with some sort of kind of farming background, so that made sense. Love that integration. I love Just Jackson, the other young gentleman that they brought into that campaign, who's brilliant, very authentic. Where I got a little bit not let down, but a couple questions was when they actually hired the person that they hired, who was like I think it was like, don't quote me, I think he's like a TikTok musician, Rex something. Didn't really have too much of an ag background per se, and maybe that's fine. But, I looked at a lot of the commentary and I followed that. And, there was a lot of folks that were like, what? Like, wow. Like, you just kind of went quickly to a path that you didn't think that they were going to follow in some random folks. And then I'm like, but again, I've been in these marketing departments and I can just see how this decision was made. I've been there many times. And so, I like an outsider point of view, but I thought the actual chief tractor officer hire was interesting. But they do a good job overall, and I highly respect that brand. But then you look at Kubota, and Kubota has done things with I think Martha Stewart, and they've thrown around some money to some folks, to Blake Shelton, I think. So they've gone big time in that, and I kind of like it. It's entertaining. But then there's a perfect example of where, all right, you're doing your tier one content marketing really well, but like, where's that ground level grassroots stuff of like your customers that are riding these things or using your machinery on a daily basis on the farm? Like, tell that story. So net, hopefully that answered your question. I think there's a lot of folks that are doing it well. I think digital, social is still an area of opportunity for a lot of these folks. And then just really remembering the authenticity part of it is obviously crucial.
Great overview. I think from what I've seen on the internets. The consensus has been similar of like the John Deere concept was great. The choice was a little peculiar, maybe a missed opportunity there. But I want to get into, Scott, like putting yourself in Tim's shoes, right? Like how do, when you're a farmer, a next generation farmer, and you want to be innovative, you want to tell your story because you see value in just building your brand, your personal brand, your farming brand. Like how do you kind of think about, a particular farmer kind of building their own personal brand and doing their own kind of brand deals versus kind of coming on your platform? Are they is it one or the other, or can they play together? Maybe talk us through that.
I think the more ways that these folks can tell their stories, the better. Sure, can we empower and help them in various ways across Make Hay? Yes. Would I love to see some of these folks, and a lot of them are doing it themselves right now, and they're creating amazing content. So, I think what I've seen here and what I've learned is, I started my pitch presentation with some facts. The world's most important and trusted occupation is farming. When you have that as a foundation on which to build a business in marketing, in content, in storytelling, there's a lot of juice there. Again, trustworthy content, most important, like no farmers, no food, all of that. So this ring of authenticity that lives within this sector more so than a lot of others is brilliant. And it needs to be one of the elements around the content. And so again, we're talking about authentic, trusted content. We're not talking about shiny, produced, scripted content. And I think that's where this industry can really sing, is that most every farmer and grower and producer that I've met, they are all very unique. They're not one of them are the same. Not one of their lands is the same. Every piece of acre is unique. And they all have strong points of view, and they're all very opinionated. And proof is in the pudding in some of those pilots that we've been doing with farmers across 9-10 different states now. Every video, every farmer is different. I mean, it just the points of view that we've gotten in this short amount of time. So, Tyler, I go back to your question, and I think when you have the foundation elements of just being true to you and your land, brings out that authentic content, whether it's good or bad, it's going to be authentic. And guess what? People are craving authentic content right now, real, raw, unscripted. So I just think farmers, just as who they are and on their land, are naturally set up for success when it comes to creating content. We just got to get them to be creating more content.
Well, I think that's a great place to wrap it, Scott. This has been a ton of fun learning about your background and what you have going on with Make Hay. As we wrap up, how can our listeners get in touch and connect with you?
Yeah, come on board. We're doing a lot of cool things. GoMakeHay.com. Our website is up and running, and we are doing a lot of different things right now in terms of pilots and getting farmers to participate and rewarding them for doing so. So there's a lot of opportunity to engage with us right now as we scale.
So, Ty, we learned that you are a nano influencer in the ag space, but what are your other takeaways from the conversation with Scott?
Are we nano influencers?
We made it.
Interesting.
We did it.
Made it. Yeah. Put it on my LinkedIn. I thought it was fascinating, Tim. I mean, it really just got, my wheels turning around how we can market the farm, how you could be doing more content. And I think it's time, Tim. I think it's time for Farmer Tim. You need to up your game. You need to be wearing a cowboy hat, and you need to lean into TikTok, and it's what the people want. So I think I think if listeners want to see more Farmer Tim content, you got to reach out. You got to message him on LinkedIn. You got to hit us up over email, tim@themodernacre.com, and let him know that you want to see Farmer Tim content.
Always giving me more to-dos when we get off a great podcast conversation. Hope you guys enjoyed this interview, and we'll be back next week with another good episode.